This is Dustin Mooney with TechX Cyber. This is the fourth installment in an educational series on cybersecurity. Today we'll be chatting about data management. Now, we talked about risk being a focal point and how we make cybersecurity decisions, so I want to talk about where data management falls into the risk formula. Remember, on the left side we had likelihood, on the right side we have impact. So data is more on the right side. When something goes wrong and data is exposed, we have bigger impacts when they're more sensitive. Okay, and so we want to think about data in terms of ensuring its confidentiality, as well as thinking about which data needs certain levels of confidentiality, as well as its integrity. Can we trust that the data we're using is what we expect it to be and that hasn't been altered? And a third consideration would be accessibility, although that's a little bit lower on the priority list in most cases. In some situations, accessibility to data could be very important. So this is a great example of why risks are dependent to the business and why the type of data that we're interacting with and the type of transactions that we're doing are really going to drive our decision-making process. So let's dive in a little bit here and talk about where to start with this concept. So the first one is this chart. This is from NIST Special Publication 800-171, which is Managing Information Security Risk. And this is a graphical representation of how you approach risk. I want to draw your attention to the two arrows. You have one from the top going to the bottom, and you have one starting from the bottom and going to the top. In most cases, when we come in and do a risk assessment, we start in Tier 3. We make an inventory of the information systems that are used to support the mission and the business processes and ultimately the organization. And so we can start from the bottom of this chart and work our way up. In some rare special circumstances, we will start at the top and work our way down, but in 99% of the cases when we do an assessment, we're starting at the bottom. So this says information systems, so we do need to create this inventory of information systems. But if we have an information system that has no data in it, what is the risk? Probably a lot less than an information system that has very sensitive or highly critical information in it. So I would argue that Tier 3 is about the information system, but also about the data. And so when we start here, we can start making smart decisions about risk, because what we can do is we can determine where is our most sensitive data, in which information system does the most sensitive data exist, and how much is there, and how are we protecting it. So we start at this bottom by creating a list of the information systems, mapping the types of data to it, and then trying to quantify how much is actually there. So when we think about risk, there is a data-specific relationship that we need to consider as well. So we always start down here in Tier 3 when we're doing these risk assessments. The only time we would start at the top is if we're forming a new organization, we're trying to get in front of risks before they happen. We may start in Tier 1. Usually that's not the case. Usually the business is running, things are going, we need to start in Tier 3. So when you go through this exercise and you do a risk assessment and you are assessing what are your information systems, there will be a time where you need to pinpoint where the data lives. We have to map the types of data that we have to information systems. So where in this information system does the data live, and in which information system does it live? So we need to categorize that. So that's the first start. Where is the data? The next one is how much. This system has 1,000 records of a type of data. This other system has 10,000 of the same data type. So which one are we going to pay more attention to? The one that has the more records, right? And so when we can start determining the quantity of data and the location, we can start dialing into the systems that have the most data that we need to worry about. The other thing too is there are many breach regulation requirements as well as data security laws that state that when there is a breach, you have to make a report about the quantity of data that was exposed. Now we can go back and retroactively do this, or we can do it before this incident happens. And it's important to do before the incident happens because this is part of the risk assessment process. Knowing which system has the most quantity, again in the previous example, will give us a direction to focus. And so we can narrow in on the systems with the most and give those the most attention to successfully reduce our risk. Now the last part of this is knowing what's inside. So we know the system, we have an idea of the quantity, of how many records are in there, and then what type of data are we dealing with. So we talked about confidentiality in the risk formula. We talked about how this could how this can influence impacts, right? So what type of data needs to have the most confidentiality? Another way of saying this is which data is the most sensitive or the most important to the company or the most important to the customer in terms of regulations. Which fines and penalties will be held against the company if a data set is exposed, and what are those data sets? So when we determine what system has data and how much is there, we need to make a determination of how sensitive that data is to. And that way, when we get this clear picture of this, what we're going to get is we're going to get a clear picture of the system. Let's say it's a critical system that everybody uses every day, and it has highly sensitive information like personally identifiable information, non-public information, trade secrets, company secrets, financial data, right? These types of information that we don't want the whole world to see. We have a high level of confidentiality that we need to maintain. Therefore, they're more important to us, and the data sensitivity is very high. Now, systems that have a large amount of this data are going to take priority over systems that do not. We can start implementing cybersecurity best practices and securing those systems first and then moving down the list. So that's how we think about the terms, these data sets in terms of risk. So we talk about due diligence and we talk about due care, and there should be some themes that you're seeing here, these words that I'm repeating that keep coming up. So this is your follow through when it comes to data. So the first thing to do is to create a running list of information systems used by the company. Now, an information system can be a group of a whole, right? So let's say all of your endpoints that your employees are using, that could be considered a system. Maybe there's an application that you log into to process credit cards. That's going to be a system. So any sort of functioning IT system that's supporting a business process is going to be something that's critical to you, that we're going to want to know how much data is there. And we're going to want to sit there and do that assessment. Where is the data in the system? How much is there? And how sensitive is it? So we want to go through those categories and assign them that information. And then after that, we're going to classify the systems. Here are the ones that do have the most sensitive information. We actually need to make a determination. Yes, this information system has non-public information or health information or personally identifiable information, and we need to give that a category so that it stands out from the others that do not, and we need to give it our time and attention. So once we figure out which ones do and which ones are most critical to the business, we can focus in on those. This is where the implementation of cybersecurity best practices starts happening, and this is where we start reducing risk in those information systems first, and this is a risk-based approach to how we're going to address our cybersecurity. That's the end of the presentation. Thanks a lot. Check in for number 5 coming up soon.